Welcome to this summary of selections from TEKOM's study on successful terminology management in companies. According to TEKOM's website, technicalcommunication.org, TEKOM is the world's largest professional association for technical communication, with approximately 9,500 members. In 2010, TEKOM published the first edition of its study, Successful Terminology Management in Companies, Practical Tips and Guidelines, Basic Principles, Implementation, Cost-Benefit Analysis, and System Overview, based upon a survey conducted of 940 practitioners within companies that work in technical fields. According to the book jacket, terminology work is a requirement of globalization. Technical progress has always left its mark on language. For every new invention, new words and terms have to be coined and introduced. What is new here is the increasing pace of technological developments and the need for new terms. This increases the number of challenges for terminology work, as new terms must be coined at the same pace as the new developments. We'll take a look here at the survey response in statistics to this survey that TEKOM conducted. So you can see here that 1,000 people were polled. Of those 1,000 people polled, there were 940 respondents. Of these 940 respondents, 34% were managerial staff, 64% employees, and 2% were in training. In terms of the subject fields reported for survey respondents, 67% reported that they work in industry, 15% in software, 13% in technical documentation and translation, and 5% in another field. In terms of the use of different terms for the same product by a different division of their company, 57% said that they saw this regularly or often, 27% said often, 12% occasionally, 3% said rarely or never. And in terms of different terms being used for the same product in different documents, 42% said that they saw this regularly or often, 29% often, 21% occasionally, and 8% rarely or never. We'll continue with a few more statistics. Of survey respondents, when asked if they would see the benefits of standardized terms being used in their operations and work, 62% thought that it would reduce their workload very heavily, 26% thought rather heavily. When asked if they thought that they would see quality improvements in their products and overall operations, 84% thought that the quality improvements would be very large. When asked if they thought that terminology management would present simplification in the workflow for clients, 79% thought that the levels of simplification would be very large. But at the same time, when asked if they saw corresponding acknowledgement of the importance of terminology work in their company, only 8% thought that terminology management was of great importance to the company, 23% thought that the level of importance was large, 32% medium average, and 32% thought that there was little or very little acknowledgement of terminology work within their companies. This means that practitioners have our work cut out for us in advocating for successful terminology management in companies, which is in line with how we need to advocate for localization overall within companies as well. We'll ask ourselves next, what are the goals of technical communication? You learned in the last slide that of 940 practitioners in companies that produce technical and technological products, only 8% of these practitioners thought that the terminology management that facilitates technical communication was of great importance to their companies who work in technical communication. So think for a moment about what you believe might be some of the goals of technical communication. You can pause the recording for a moment to formulate your ideas if you'd like. So again, what are the goals of technical communication? The goals of technical communication include precise communication that eliminates ambiguity in order to prevent communication from being inefficient, And you can likely imagine how terminology mismanagement impedes these goals of precise communication, elimination of ambiguity, and efficient communication. We'll take a look now at the sectors in which terminology survey respondents worked. Here are 42 different sectors listed from Table 25, sector in which the company is active, on pages 64 through 65 of the TEKOM study. And these sectors include, as you can see here, manufacturing systems, industrial tools, software development, robotics, automation, electronic systems, refrigeration, fuel cells, home improvement, automobile suppliers, combustion engines, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What additional sectors can you think of in which terminology management is important, in which it makes a difference for terminology management to be conducted? Now think about the stakeholders who interact in companies to produce products. These stakeholders need to have a harmonized conceptualization of the terminology they use in order to make production efficient. Here are 32 different departments listed from Table 31, frequency of references of departments of the companies involved in assigning terms, from page 72 of the TEKOM study. And these stakeholders include technical documentation, research and development, marketing, engineering, translation, localization, sales, customer service, training, corporate communications, purchasing, quality assurance, partner relationship management, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So these were the stakeholders that survey respondents reported that they were working with in the production and operations of assigning and managing terminology. What other departments and stakeholders can you think of who would need to be able to use terminology consistently and together in order to facilitate teamwork in production and operations? Next, consider the many types of information products that a single company produces to communicate about their products. An information product is a document or content that conveys information about or helps users navigate a service or product, such as user manuals, safety materials, or user menus. Here are 24 types of information products listed from Table 28, frequency of nominations about the creation of other information about products in the company, on page 67 of the TEKOM study, and another table, frequency of nominations of the departments in a company that are responsible for the creation of specific product information, on pages 68 through 70. So these were the information products that survey respondents reported that they were producing, and they include instructions for use, user manuals, installation instructions, maintenance instructions, graphic user interface guides, online help, data sheets, repair manuals, press releases, presentations, illustrations, etc., etc. What other kinds of information products can you think of in which terminology use would need to be consistent in order to communicate consistently with clients and employees? Now we'll think about the types of things that impact terminology work. Many aspects of how companies function impact terminology work, including the size of a company. So Table 64 of the TEKOM terminology study highlights the fact that respondents came from companies sized between 1 and over 5,000 employees. Think about the resources that a small company will have versus a large company. The number of contributing departments. Table 32 of the TEKOM terminology study notes that for respondents to their surveys, on average 5 different departments were contributing terminology, with anywhere between 0 and 20 departments contributing. While technical documentation was mostly responsible for this work, when so many departments contribute, the interconnectedness and cooperation among them is very important. The objectives of contributing departments will also have an impact on terminology work because different stakeholders will have different objectives in their communication. Technical communicators will want to use language that is precise. Marketers will want to use language that sells. The legal department will want to use language that avoids liabilities. Other questions that need to be taken into account when thinking about the objectives of contributing departments: which content is intended for internal use versus external use, which content is client-facing, and how do those sorts of characteristics of the information products being used impact terminology usage. Something else that will impact terminology work is the number of languages that an organization is working in. Table 35 of the TEKOM terminology study indicates that survey respondents worked with 10 languages on average, or anywhere between 1 and over 30 languages. So the complexity of the task, of course, only increases the more languages that are being worked with. Finally, the number of information products produced by a company also has a great impact. Table 29 of the terminology study indicated that survey respondents produced on average 60 different types of information products. Just a couple more things that we need to take into account when thinking about what might impact terminology work that aren't listed on this slide. Where will the information products be used? Are they going to be used in a technological interface? Is it going to be a document that's downloaded? And what are the number of information systems that are being used by a company, and how do these information systems communicate as well? What additional impacts to terminology work can you think of beyond those that have been discussed here? Now we'll take a look at the product life cycle. The product life cycle has many stages, like product planning and development, product marketing, product usage, and product maintenance. And terminology issues must be responded to at all of these stages, since information products are developed in parallel to these stages, rather than coming after. What happens when these stages don't take terminology or the translation of terminology into consideration? That is another thing that has an impact on terminology work. That concludes this summary of selections from TEKOM's study on successful terminology management in companies. Thank you for listening.